Lesson number 11, creating motion graphics templates. In here we're going to add controls to the essential graphics panel. We're going to create checkboxes to select a background image. We'll protect portions of a project from time stretching. We'll export a motion graphics template. We'll create master properties for layers and nested compositions, and then we'll work with motion graphics templates, and Premiere Pro is where it's going to ultimately end up going over to. We're not going to jump into there today. We're going to look at those master properties and create what is inside of there. So with this, we'll go ahead and open up After Effects if you haven't. We're going to create ourselves a new project. And then we can either do the file save as now, or of course you can go in and import the stuff. I tend to import my stuff before I go in and save this. So we're going to come over to our project panel. Depending on what your space looks like, you may need to go in and adjust your workspace. So this one's currently in Essential Graphics. But we're going to go into our project panel. And let's go ahead and double click to import and navigate to wherever it is that you have your lesson saved. And inside of the assets folder for lesson number 11, you should find 4 PSD files. These are 4 Photoshop files in there. We're going to click on the top one, hold down Shift. Let's go ahead and select the bottom one, which will give you all 4 of them. Let's just go ahead and click on Open. It's going to import those 4 PSD files into your project panels. You should find them all over here. Now once we have those set, we're going to go ahead and create ourselves a new composition. So let's go ahead and click just on the new composition button inside of our composition panel. And then we're going to come in here and adjust what we have for our composition. So we're going to call this title sequence. We come down here to our presets. We're going to choose our HDV 1080-25. So 1080 for our resolution, 25 frames per second. We're going to come down to our duration. Go ahead and make sure it's set to 10 seconds. And then our background color here, go ahead and confirm that you have your background color set to black. So we can see it there, and we also see out here. It tells us that it's also black. So once we have that set, go ahead and click OK. And now we have our new composition. We can see it inside of our project panel there called Title Sequence. Now once we have that set, we want to go ahead and bring in the Embrace PSD file. We're just going to drag that down into our timeline. So it should be the top item that's there. We're just going to drag it down there and drop it into our timeline, giving us something to actually have as a background. This allows us to go in as we start to work with the text, to begin to position our text. We'll be able to see a little bit better as to where it is that we're putting it. So what's going to happen here is inside of this project, we're going to end up having a larger series title. It's going to be at the top of the screen. It's going to move down onto the page as it actually goes in and grows larger. And then we're also going to go in and have an episode title. It's going to appear. It's going to come in letter by letter. And then it will explode off of the screen. So we're going to create the layers. And then we'll ultimately go in and animate those layers as well. So let's go ahead and go up to the top of our screen to our horizontal type tool. Go and let's select that. Let's come out here inside of our composition panel. We're just going to click, which is going to give us an insertion point. Once you get that insertion point in there, let's just go ahead and type in shot in the dark. Now it's going to look possibly a little bit different than mine, depending on what you have currently set inside of the character panel. If we come over here and look inside our character panel, what they are using inside of here is actually Calder Dark Grit Shadow, and also just Calder Dark. We're just going to go ahead and choose something that allows us to work with something that gives us a a bold or a light, semi-bold. So what you want to use, if you want to use Myriad, you can stick with Myriad. If you want to go into Helvetica, Arial, any of those, it's not going to matter for us. We're just going to go in and choose a couple different ones, and then we're going to use the type on there. So I'm just going to leave mine as Myriad Pro at this point. And with that, we have, like I said, a bold and a semi-bold. So for this one, this is going to be our main heading, shot in the dark. So I'm going to go ahead and just leave it Myriad Pro Bold. But what I am going to do is I'm going to uncheck in mine. I'm going to turn off small caps so we have regular case to it at this point. As we start, and I may choose to go ahead and make it all caps. Actually, we're just going to go ahead and make it all caps. So we have our shot in the dark text. Our fill color on this, we're going to go ahead and set our fill color to be white. Right now you'll see, depending on how you set yours up, you may have a different color in there. So we can go ahead and we can choose white. We have our white and our black here we can work off of. So we're going to go ahead and choose white. We're going to have no stroke on it. So if you don't have the stroke with slash through, go ahead and set that to no stroke. And then on the size, we're going to go ahead and we're going to take this and bring this up larger. So we go off of 120 pixels, maybe a little bit larger. They're using 140. So we are using a different typeface. So with that, so we can go ahead and push this up to 140. And then we want to go ahead and increase our tracking as well. So when we come in here and look, right now tracking set to 0. Let's go ahead and increase the tracking to 10. And then if we grab our selection tool, this allows us to go ahead and choose where we want to position this at. So we're going to go towards the center. If you're not getting the guides that are coming on to align that to the center, up in the top of your screen, just go ahead and check on snapping. And we'll go ahead and we'll just place this right about here. Looks good enough for me. So we have this layer selected right now. Let's go ahead and jump out to our 2-second mark. So again, make sure that we have the shot in the dark layer selected and that you're not on embrace. And with this set, we're going to go ahead and hit P, and we're going to hold down Shift and hit S, which is just going to allow us to go ahead and see our position property as well as our scale property on here. So this is where we've decided we want this to be at this time. So let's go ahead and toggle on the stopwatches for both of those. It's going to go and give us our initial keyframe. So out inside of your timeline, you should see keyframes for both properties. And then we'll go back to the beginning of it. So we're just going to press the home key. It's going to jump our timeline back to the 0 mark. And with this, we can go ahead and adjust what we have for our scale. Let's go ahead and drop our scale down to 50%. Now with this, I'm going to go ahead and just grab a hold of this, and I'm going to go ahead and move this up towards the very top of the composition. So you should see a new position property being recorded for that. If you want to preview it, you'll see how it scales up and comes down into your shot. Now with this, I'm going to go ahead and save this. Once I imported the stuff, I should have actually saved it, but now that I actually have placed content and I'm beginning to animate, I want to go ahead and save this. So we're just going to call this Lesson 11 Finished. So now as we go through and begin to add additional components to it, we're not going to worry about losing them. Now, as we watch this, we can scrub across. We can see it 2 seconds. It's coming down, scaling up. We now want to come out here and allow for our show to actually come on there. So we're looking at the episode numbers on here. So we're going to go ahead and move forward 10 frames. So go to the 2:10 mark. And once again, we're going to grab a hold of our horizontal type tool. We will come out here and we will click again inside of our composition, giving us an insertion point. And we're going to go ahead and say episode 3, a light in the distance. Now, one thing you should notice right away once you put this in here is that we have an issue with it fitting on the screen or inside of the composition. So let's go ahead and select all of our text. And I'm going to drop this down to a semi-bold. I'm going to go ahead and adjust the size on here. Now, based upon what we have, we're going to have to take this a little smaller than what it's going to list. So for even numbers' sakes, I'm going to take this down to 90 pixels. And then we have the ability in here for our horizontal scale. Let's go ahead and move that down a little bit. So drop it down. We'll take it down to 50%. And then at this point, we could choose to adjust our text a little bit. So I'm going to push the text then back up to 110 pixels. So now you should have something that looks somewhat like this. And then I'm just going to make sure that I go ahead and select this text and place it in here into the center of the composition. Once you have that position and you're happy with that, go ahead and let's save that. So as of right now, when we go through and we start to work with it, you'll see that your text for the episode is currently staying on there. But Shot in the Dark is going to go through and move. So we're going to work with how this is going to come in. Don't be concerned with the fact that it's on there right now. Remember, we're going to go and we're going to add some effects to work with that episode text. So let's go ahead and we're going to jump out to the 9-second mark. And what we do is we want to go ahead and get into our explosion here. So remember, the text is going to come on. We're actually going to ultimately bring it on here momentarily with the typewriter effect. But then when it disappears, we're going to have it go through this little explosion. So we're going to go ahead and go out to that 9-second mark. We're going to come in here to our effects and preset panel over on the right-hand side. And let's go ahead and start to type in explosion. Once you get an EXPLO, you should see that there's an explosion 2 on here. We want to go ahead and make sure that that is on our episode 3 layer. So we can go ahead and we can just drop that on the episode 3 layer. Now, as soon as we go through and do that, you'll see if we animate it, you'll see the text. It's a simple scrub. We'll start to see. Remember, we set it at 9 because that's when we want that action to actually begin. So it always does the keyframes based upon where the playhead is currently at. So it allows the explosion to take place. If we go back over to that 2:10 mark, remember this is where we came in and we had that text. That's where we want this text to actually begin at. So we're going to come over to here. And we're going to go back up to our effects and presets. We'll just click the X to clear that. And we're going to start typing in typewriter. Maybe. There we go. Typewriter. And we're going to choose the animate in for our typewriter. Let's go ahead and place that on that episode 3 text as well. Now when we go and we place that at that 210 mark, you're going to see that the text appears as though it disappears. It did. That's because at this point, this is when that typewriter effect is going to start. So now it's going to click, 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 and bring in the text as we go in and use that. So now if you start to scrub across, you're going to see how it's typing in our episode 3. A light in the distance, and then we get 9, it's going to go through and explode. If we come up here to our 9-second mark again, if you didn't align your text, go ahead and do so now. Grab a hold of that. Maybe you want to move it up, move it down. You can go ahead and make those adjustments to it at this time. We essentially just want it to appear in that lower third of the screen. That might be a little high. I'm going to leave it where it's at, though. Okay, I lied. I'm going to go ahead and move it down just a little bit. So now we have this ultimately positioned. I'm going to go ahead and save that. If we go ahead and hit our home key, which is going to take us back to the beginning, we can go ahead and preview our 10 seconds. So we have our shot in the dark coming up. Episode 3 typewriter's in. Gives us enough time to read it. Then at 9 seconds, it's going to explode. And then at 10 seconds, it's done. So we can go ahead and we can stop that. Let's go ahead and go back to our shot in the dark. We can go ahead and toggle close all of our properties and deselect. So at this point, we simply have our text going in and animating, and we have our text coming on. But we want to work a little bit with that background image that is in there as well, because it's just sitting there. There's nothing going on with it. So let's add a little interest to that as well. So we want to make an unsettling effect to this. So let's go ahead and select that embrace.psd layer. And we want to add ourselves a new adjustment layer. So if we come up to the top, we have layer, new, adjustment layer. You'll notice that the adjustment layer is going to come in directly above the layer that you had selected. Had we gone in and been still on the episode text, we went in and created the new adjustment layer, it would have been above everything. So as you go and you start working with them, especially as you get more and more layers to it, make sure that when you're inserting them, you know what you want it to impact. Remember, it impacts everything that is below where that layer is at. So now with this set, let's go ahead and rename it. So it is selected over here. I can just simply hit return, which will highlight it. We're going to call this background effect. Get used to naming stuff. So that way you're able to go in and recognize what is what as opposed to it just simply being on adjustment layer. So we have that background effect set there. We're going to go ahead and bring this out here to the 5-second mark. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and set an endpoint for that background effect. We don't want this to go on throughout the whole thing. We want it to happen once we get to the 5-second mark. So we're going to hold down Option and hit the left bracket key, or begin brackets as some people refer to it. And that's just going to trim it so that that's now our endpoint. You'll notice if you look inside of your timeline from that 5-second mark back to the beginning of the composition, we don't see that blue bar in there indicating that we have content there. So with that background effect layer selected in there, we're going to go up to our effects and preset once again. Let's go ahead and clear out what we had in there before for our typewriter. And let's start to type in bad TV. We just have to get in bad, and we'll see here image special effects that we have bad TV 1 warp, TV 2 old, and TV 3 weak. We're ultimately going to go in and use the bad TV 3. And we want to go ahead and this is going to be part of that background effect. So make sure that you drag it into the background effect and not into or on the actual embrace.psd layer. So while there are times where we can drag that out and we can drop it right on the composition, if you went and did that now, odds are it's going to go ahead and it's going to be applied to that embrace PSD, and we want this just to be applied to the background effect layer. So now if we go through and we look at what's there, if we go ahead and scrub back, you'll see nothing's there. As soon as we hit that 5-second mark, you'll see that effect comes in. As you scrub across there, you'll see how it goes through and bounces that around. You can go in and preview the rest of it if you wanted to. What happens now is we have the fact that we have the title sliding down. We have the episode title appearing. The image is going to become distorted. And of course, at the end, it explodes and goes off of there. Once we apply that effect, what ends up happening with it is it's a lot harder to see what's in the background as we work with it. Well, we can go ahead and we can adjust that. If you want something that's super unsettling, we can't see it, then we can leave that there. But we also have the effects that we can control over inside of our effect controls. So if you look over there, you'll see the wave warp, color bounce, noise, Venetian blinds. Those are all things that get applied to this as it goes into there. So if we come over and we start to look at the effects that we have available to us. Right now we're going to see our wave type over here is currently set at noise. Well, there are other options inside of here. And when we get into effects, as you start working more with effects, I do recommend that you go in and see what each one does. Don't be afraid to go ahead and select it and go out here and scrub across and see what the effect ends up looking like. So the sine versus square. And just get a feeling of what ultimately the effects are with them. Once you take a look at those, and that we're ultimately going to come down to smooth noise. So instead of having those really harsh lines going in there, you can see it becomes waves. So that way as we go through and play it, we still get the distortion, we still get the noise inside of there, but we can see what's going on with that. So once you have that set and you're happy, you can go ahead and save that. Now, underneath of your window, in workspaces, if you're not in Essential Graphics, if you're on default, which may have looked like this, this is what you're set on, go ahead and choose Essential Graphics. That's going to give us this Essential Graphics panel that's going to show up on here. If you don't have that panel that show up, you can also come underneath of Window and select Essential Graphics so that we get the Essential Graphics panel in there. Now with the Essential Graphics panel, what happens is it allows us to go in and build some custom controls and then ultimately share those out in a motion graphics template. So if we go through, we start to build things, you don't have to go in and restart everything. You're able to take this and select things, and we're going to create checkboxes to allow us to decide what it is that we ultimately see inside of there. So what we're going to do is we need to go in and begin to work with what is on here. So we have here a primary. So we're looking at our composition on here. So we want to make sure that underneath of this, we go ahead and we choose our title sequence. So for the primary setup, we're going to choose title sequence. In previous versions, you may see that listed as master. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to select that, and your book actually even refers to it as master menu. It's the primary menu. They're both the same thing. So up here for the title, up here for the name, instead of leaving it as untitled, we're going to call this Shot in the Dark Sequence. So right now there isn't anything really set in there. We need to go through and begin to add controls inside of here, transform properties to allow us to go in and begin to edit to what is there and make adjustments to things. So inside of our timeline panel, if we come down here, we look at our episode 3 layer, we toggle that open, we see that we have our text, and we also have our transform inside of there. We're going to go ahead and expand out our text so we see where it says source text. We're going to go ahead and grab a hold of that source text, and we're going to drag it up here inside of this Essential Graphics panel. We're going to let go of that. What you're going to see then is we have our text, source text that shows up on here. And that's the way it goes in and titles it. Well, we want to go ahead and we want to change what this says. So instead of it saying text, source text, let's go ahead and highlight that and call it episode title. So inside of here, if we come over here to edit properties, what's going to happen is going to give us this pop-up menu here talking about our source properties. What is it that we want to be able to go in here and change? Now you will find if you are working in the 2021 book that some of the ways in which things are highlighted in there are a little bit different. When we come in here, we're going to go ahead and say enable font size adjustment. And we can click on OK. What you'll see then inside of your Essential Graphics is that here we have the adjustment for the size. So now that shows up as that slider for us to go in and be able to edit that. So what we're building is we're building quick controls. So again, we don't have to go back in and redo everything. As you go through and make some adjustments to it, I do encourage you to save early, save often. Let's go into our episode 3 here. And I'm going to toggle that up, but then I want to go ahead and select this and hit P just to see our position property as well. Let's drag that position property up here inside of our Essential Graphics as well. So now you'll see that we have the episode title text, which is up top. We have the size adjustment here. And we also have the position available for us to go in and change that as well. So we go there, we start to look at them. There are other things that are available to us as well inside of here. So we want to go in and start looking at what other things can we adjust. Do we need to go in and actually adjust the lightness and darkness depending on what we have for a background image? Because as we go in and we start to work with this, you're going to see we're going to put 4 different images in there, or have the ability to select 4 different images. Well, what happens if we don't have enough contrast between the background and our text? That will allow us to go in and ultimately adjust those settings. So we come into our Essential Graphics panel. Up here at the top, we're going to see this solo supported properties. We're going to go ahead and we're going to click on that. Now as we go in and we select that, it's only going to show us the properties down below. So we start looking at the properties. These are the properties that we are able to go in and work with. So what we want to do with this is we want to hide the properties for our shot in the dark in the episode 3, because what we're going to do is we're going to get into the color balance area inside of the background effect layer. So let's go ahead and we're going to toggle that up. We'll toggle up our shot in the dark because we're going to work inside of our background effects in here. And you're going to see we have our ability to control our color balance, which are color balance HLS settings inside of here. But what we're going to do is we're going to come down here, and inside of here we want access in the color balance, but we're going to actually just go ahead and bring up our lightness and our saturations into there. So if I grab a hold of lightness and drag it up, we'll see that we get the lightness in there. We can also come down here and select our saturation and bring that up as well. Now, depending on what you're seeing inside of your Essential Graphics panel, what you're going to start to notice is a lot of stuff goes in there, and the text that's in there, you may not be able to get all the way out to understand what it is that you are seeing. We can come in here and we can adjust this text. So we could just go ahead and set that to position, just like color balance, HLS, lightness. We can come in here, remove the text so we know that it's only lightness. And last thing, we can come in here and we can delete that off so we only have saturation. So as you start to work with it, depending on what you're bringing into this, depending on what you need to know from it, and what you remember about what's inside of there, you can go in and rename things to make it easier for you to understand what it is that you're working with. Now if we come down there, we also then have our noise property. We want to go ahead and bring up the ability to adjust the amount of noise. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that up there as well. And once again, I'm going to go ahead and just call it amount of noise. So if you want to, you can go ahead and you can slide these around. See what happens when you go through and do that. So you can see what starts to work with everything. And then go ahead and make sure you undo back to where things were at. Or if you had saved it, you could also just revert back to where you ultimately saved it as well. So you'll see revert isn't currently available to me. That's because I just saved it, so it's not going to revert to the last saved. But if you had gone in and moved those all around and you had saved it right before you had done that, you could just hit revert. It will take you back to that as well. So now we've gone in and we've added some properties inside of there, but we want to go ahead and control, or at least organize a bit more, what these things are. So down at the very bottom of the Essential Graphics, you'll see this drop-down menu. By default, it says Add Formatting. We're going to go ahead and say Add Group. So once you add a group, you're going to see that you get a group that shows up inside of your Essential Graphics area. Let's go ahead and name this first one Episode Title. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and put the episode title into there. And we're also going to go ahead and move our position into there. And then you can decide the order of them inside of that group, whether you want the episode title on top or you want the position on top as well. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to make sure nothing's selected. We'll go back down there to the bottom again. Let's go ahead and add ourselves another group. Let's go ahead and call this background effect. And inside of the background effect, we want to go ahead and put our saturation, lightness, and amount of noise. So now if we were to toggle those up, you'll see that we get a nice clean effect from that. If we come down here to our timeline, we can go ahead and we can close up all of the properties that are down there. Now up to this point, we've gone through and we've worked with our episode title. We've gone through, we've created the background effect, and we've decided some of the things that we want to actually have control of inside of here when we actually export out this template. But we also want to provide the editors, anybody else that might get into this, with a choice of different background images based upon what it is that they're going through and using. So let's go ahead and go over to our projects panel. So we're going to jump to the project tab. Remember, we have these other images inside of here. So we're going to go ahead and select the holding gun PSD, the man hat PSD, and the stylized scene PSD files. Now you can select one, hold down Command, select the next one, and then select the other. And we're just going to drag those down here and put them at the bottom of our stack. Now when we go through and we place them in there, you're going to notice nothing changes in there, because once again the image there from the embrace is actually over top of the other images that we just went in and brought into the timeline. Now the other things that we're seeing underneath there will impact them. If I did uncheck the visibility of the embrace layer, you'll see that the next one that's there also has the same effect applied to it. If we were to continue to undo those, you'll see we can work our way through all of the different images that are inside of there. So that's because that background effect is above those. If for some reason you had the background effect or you brought those in and you put them above that, we would not see the impact. Plus we would also see something other than the image that we currently see in there, which is the embrace. So down here, let's go ahead and we want to select all 4 of our images. So I'm going to hold down Shift after I click on embrace. and select down to our stylized scene. So all of these are selected. Then we're going to go up to the top where it says Effect. We're going to do Effect. We're going to come down here to our Expression Controls, and we're going to go over to our Checkbox Control. So what's going to happen is it's going to add to it a Checkbox Control effect to all of those selected layers. So when we do that, you'll see here we have, inside of our Effects Controls, now we have this Checkbox Control checkbox showing up. What this is ultimately going to allow us to do is allow us eventually to get it set so that we can select just through the checkbox as to what image it is that we ultimately want to be seeing. So all four of these down here are still selected. Let's go ahead and hit T, which is going to open up our opacity property. And what happens is we want to go in then and we want to create an expression that ties the opacity property to the appropriate checkbox. So that way it goes in and works off of that checkbox. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to come down and we're going to deselect all of our layers. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to select our embrace.psd layer. And then we want to take the pick whip from the opacity property and we're going to drag that up to that checkbox. So we'll come over and we'll grab the pick whip. And we're going to go ahead and we want to bring that up here to our checkbox control that's up here. So we're going to bring it right up here, working off of that. We're going to drop that inside of there. Now, as we went through and we put that in there, if you watch this value right now, if you check that checkbox on, notice that it changes to 1. We're going to fix that so it's not just 1. But just know that that's actually what's going in and happening with that. So what we want to do is we're going to go ahead and we want to change what we have for that expression. So if we come down here, we toggle that up. So here's the expression opacity. If we come out here and we look, we see effect. So our checkbox control checkbox. When that goes on, then it's going through and it's making a change to the opacity. Now the opacity on it at that point in time is simply only going to 1. If we go ahead and we come out here and we click inside of where the actual script is at for this, you'll see it highlights. If you've done any programming, this is where it's going to go into. So it's talking about what's happening. So at the end of this, though, after where it says the checkbox control checkbox, we're going to go ahead and we want to add in the asterisk and then 100. So now we've just gone in and we've changed that. So if we click away from it, you'll see now effects, control, checkbox 100. So now what happens as we go through and work with that is as we toggle that on, you're going to see now the opacity goes to 100. So we're going to do that for each one of the images. So the next would be our holding gun. Once again, opacity up to our checkbox. Toggle that down, click inside of here, add in our text. And if you wanted to go through and test each one, you could go in and make sure that when you click on it, it goes to opacity of 100. Now once we have those set, we're ready to go ahead and start to add some controls into our essential graphics. So let's go ahead and come down here, and we're going to go ahead and select all 4 of the layers that are down here. And we're just going to go ahead and hit E, which takes us to our effects. So E is going to show us what effects are in here. So we currently see there then checkbox control for all 4 of them down below. So what we're going to do is we're going to toggle open our embrace.psd. And with that, we see that we have our checkbox control, and then we have our checkbox. Well, what we want to do is we want to go ahead and take that checkbox property and drag it up into here. So we're going to set that inside of here. And we're going to go ahead and rename this one because we're going to bring each of them up into there. We don't want to just leave it as checkbox control. We're not going to know which one it is unless we hover over it, and you'll see your tooltip does show title sequence embrace.psd, and then it goes through the effects. So let's just go ahead and give this a name here. So this is our embrace. Once we have that one set, we'll come down here. We'll do the same thing for our holding gun. We'll toggle that down, grab that checkbox property, bring it up here as well. We'll call it holding gun. Do the same thing for the man hat. Man in hat. And then lastly, down for our stylized scene, we'll go ahead and call this stylized. Then since we have 4 of them in there, let's go ahead and come down. We're just going to add ourselves another group. We're going to go ahead and call that group background images. And let's go ahead and place each of those into there. And then if you want to adjust the order, you can. You'll notice those move around just like any other layers that we use in any other area of After Effects. Now with this background images, someone may not understand what they need to go in and do with that. So what we want to do is we want to go ahead and come back down here to the bottom where we had add formatting, and let's do add comment. And then inside of our comment, let's sit here and tell them to toggle on the image you want to use. I'm going to put that at the top of the stack so when they come in here they can see what's there and what it is that they actually want to go in and work with. And just like anywhere else inside of After Effects, we know that blue text or blue highlighted text indicates that we can change something there. If we come up there now, if we click on the word off, you'll see it becomes on. This allows us to toggle on and off those. What we're really doing is we're going in and we're telling it based upon what we had built into there with the scripting, dealing with the pick whip and the opacity expression, to go ahead and show that or run that at 100% opacity as we go ahead and check on it. So let's go ahead and toggle, go down, select all of your layers. If you have any effects or properties that are expanded, go ahead and click on those, and then just go ahead and hit the U for the Uber key and go ahead and close those up. Now, as we go through and we start to work with InDesign things, we have the ability to go in and adjust how it works with time. That's part of responsive design as we go in and begin to use things. Well, as we work with stuff, especially when we go through and we start animating content, we want that content to move at a specific rate. We've designed it that way. It's set up that way. So we can actually go in and we can preserve timing for specific areas inside of these templates. So what we're going to do is we want to go in and protect the duration of where we're dealing with the episode title transitions. So we're going to go in, and inside of After Effects, we can define a specific area to work. So when we go in and we start to look at it, remember we actually have our work area that we can go in and use. So we can decide where do we want our work area to start. And this is what we're going to use to go in and lock down areas or keep certain areas from being able to be adjusted. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to adjust the beginning of our work area to move over here to that 2-second mark. So what's happening, this is where that animation begins to change inside of here. So this is our work area. So you'll see when you hover over top of it, it says work area start. We're going to move that so it lines right up here with our 2-second mark. And then as we go through this, this moves through here as that comes on, because this is all just about controlling that typewriter effect of episode 3 showing up. So we're going to move that to our 5-second mark. So then what we're going to end up doing with that is we need to close off our work area as well. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to set this up so that all we have protected is between that 2-second mark and the 5-second mark. Now you'll see we can come in here, we can right click on here, and you'll see it says create protected region from work area. It's one way we can work with it. We can also come up here to the top where we have our composition. Then inside of our composition, down here where it says responsive design time. So what's happening here is we're trying to go in and say we want to control this area of the time. So when you go in and you start to work with responsive design, that we don't end up going in and allowing this to get stretched or anything and impact what we have for animation. So we're just going to go ahead and click here. It says create protected region from work area. So see it goes in there, it highlights up the area or shades the area, indicating that we've gone in and created a protected region. So we can go ahead and we can save that. So now that we go through and we have all of this stuff set up, what we can do here is down in the bottom portion of our essential graphics, you're going to see a little box here that says export motion graphics template. We go ahead and we click on that. You're going to see it comes up, export as motion graphics template. What do you want the destination to ultimately end up being? So where is it going to? Local templates folder is usually the default, so it should stay on there. You'll see there's other warnings down here too when it starts looking at fonts and that may be in there. You can leave those all on just so that way it'll at least warn you. It's not going to stop anything from happening. So don't be concerned if you have those checked, that's going to go in and do something else with it. We're going to click on OK. And that's going to go through and it exports out then your motion graphics template file. Now you could go in and if you open up and begin working inside of Premiere Pro, which is the main place where this is ultimately going to come into, you'll be able to go in and bring in that template and load that template so you can go in and select what it is that you want to be seeing inside of there.